You know, John, we talk about trade deadlines. The NBA brought it today. The last couple of days, the last 48 hours have been anarchy.
Yeah, I was just telling Josh that back when I was covering the league, it was always a disappointment. You'd always have all the hype, and there'd be 4 or 5 trades maybe. Now it's like hockey. Everybody's moving.
Yeah, everybody's there's minor trades, major trades. Guys getting waived. This guy's getting released. He's getting bought out. This guy's getting traded. 3 guys are going there. 2 guys are going here. One's getting bought out. I mean, it has just been nonstop today. Since yesterday, about 6 o'clock yesterday, it was like Thunderdome.
Yeah, and I'm glad I didn't have to deal with all that because that's like head swimming. This is the one day where I'm not going to be the on-demand leader. The Phillies and the Sixers are taking over.
Michael Kasky-Blomain will have you beat today, I think. Either him or Frank. Frank has been
that's what I said. I want my fans and more, let's be honest, more Eagles fans. They got to show up today. I got to keep my lead.
By the way, John McMullen, the most listened to YouTube videos by far. Michael Kasky-Blomain, he's right up there behind you a lot of times. He does very well, too. So Michael will probably beat you today with Folt's conversation. But we will see. Let's give him something to listen to here. All right. I want to start with there is some margin. And we talked a lot yesterday about Nick Foles. I got to get that right because Markelle Fultz got traded. But Nick Foles, who is now a free agent. But there are some reports out there that Jacksonville is going to try, they will make some sort of play for Foles. So let's kind of talk about what realistically Jacksonville, as we'll start with them, could do. Like if the Eagles are sitting here now, can Jacksonville call them and start to negotiate?
Well, not in an above-board fashion, but there's always, and it usually happens.
And I'm not talking about like this minute. I'm talking about the next step once the Eagles franchise him.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be honest. There's a lot of sort of backroom dealing, especially at the NFL Combine, where everybody sort of gets together, agents, front office people, and that's where you sort of get some wink stuff done. I mean, if you think about the start of the new league year, not only from trade standpoint, but also free agency, you always have a couple deals that happen right away. Well, they're not going by the letter of the law and waiting for the minute you can start negotiating. These things are kind of felt out behind the scenes, and that's what has to happen from an Eagles perspective. If they want to roll the dice and put that franchise tag on Nick Foles, they got to be really, really sure that somebody's going to jump right away because they don't want that $25 million, whatever it ends up to be, on the cap for more than a few minutes, to be honest. And even from that standpoint, as I've kind of explained yesterday, to trade him, the Eagles still have to get under the cap once the new league year starts with that $25 million on the books. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really difficult, and it doesn't make a lot of sense from either Nick Foles' standpoint, and that's why his camp bought out the mutual option so quickly. And it doesn't make sense, more importantly, from any potential team that wants to trade for him because they know these issues. And you have to ask yourself, forget about the Eagles. Think like you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. Why do you want to spend 1 year and $25 million for Nick Foles and say to yourself, hey, let's say he plays great and he has an all-pro year and everything works out beautifully. Then you got to go into free agency next year with Nick Foles. You can place the franchise tag again on him, but that means you have to pay him upwards of $30 million, most likely. So you're talking 2 years and $55 million plus giving up something in return. I just can't see it.
Yeah, and I guess when you look at Jacksonville, you take a look at guys who maybe are disgruntled and not happy. People have asked me, can they get players from a team like Jacksonville? Do you see any scenario where they could get actual valuable players back in return, or is this strictly the Eagles are strictly going to get picks back, if anything, for Nick?
Yeah, it would strictly be a pick. I mean, if you're talking about valuable
Right.
players.
In other words, you're not getting
anyway.
Leonard Fournette back in return here.
No. And for a couple reasons, and it's sort of the same path you're going down, maybe a different fork of the road, but from Jacksonville's standpoint, again, the bigger issue is the contract. It's not about what's coming in return. If you were free to work out a deal, for instance, that's team friendly, and they could sign Nick Foles and make him the face of their franchise. So number one, you say they have to want to do that, and then say the ability to sign him for 4 years at $18 million a year or something of that nature. Then you could probably get something of value back for Nick Foles. But that can't happen on what the landscape is. Now that he's essentially bought his free agency, he's scheduled to be a free agent, and the only thing the Eagles can do at this standpoint is put the franchise tag on him, and that hurts value. And it hurts value significantly.
Yeah. So in the end, I mean, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. We both agree they should have traded him last year, highest value. They didn't. He played well, got him into the playoffs. Everybody loves Nick. But do you think Howie Roseman misplayed this whole Foles thing, the way it's kind of turned out?
I mean, I think so.
Because for the most part, I think we think that Howie's done a very good job. He should be given a lot of credit, but that doesn't mean he gets 100% of the things right.
No, nobody does. And I've been very high on Howie Roseman, the job he's done since he's been back in power on the football operations side. I think overall he's done a very good job. That doesn't mean you're perfect. Nobody's perfect. I think Elton Brand has done a brilliant job for the Sixers early in his stead as the GM there, but it doesn't mean he's perfect. Nobody's perfect, and it was sort of weighing it, and the Eagles decided to err on the side of caution, and the fact that they were worried about Carson Wentz coming back from the knee injury, and then from a playing standpoint, that turned out to be probably the right way to think about things because he ends up getting hurt again. But long term, they knew Carson was going to be the starting quarterback of this franchise, even though some fans differed from that perspective. It was never a thought in the organization that Nick Foles was anything more than Carson Wentz's backup. And they knew that this was the final year. They knew they couldn't do it any longer. They had kicked the can down the road as long as possible. And they knew by not trading him last offseason, they weren't going to get as much this offseason. Mm-hmm. So they made their decision. They might be happy with it because they got to the playoffs and they won a game.
This is a unique situation, John, where a team actually almost values the relationship with the player more than the business aspect.
Yeah, I don't even necessarily know that's true. I think it was a football decision. I think they value that backup quarterback position to a degree, and they enjoyed having the best backup quarterback in football. And they made a decision, and they said it was more valuable to have that for one more year than get a second-round pick. And maybe they stand by that decision. I personally think it was the wrong decision. I think you agree with me. But I can see their end of it. And they could spin it like it was a success, and they went as far as they went, and they're still going to get a compensatory pick, maybe a fourth-rounder, and they'll get something in return. But certainly they could have gotten more, so you have to weigh, is that worth that late season run and a playoff victory? The Eagles will probably say yes. I'd prefer to have the high draft pick.
And we're making the assumption that if, say, Nate Sudfeld played, that they wouldn't have won those games. And, I guess Foles is a better player than Sudfeld, but that goes back to Sudfeld because I had said before, keeping Foles, I think, tells the story of Sudfeld last year, meaning maybe they just didn't think Sudfeld was ready, so they had to bring Foles back because you wonder if they're at the point where they say, look, if we just have Sudfeld for one more year, we can kind of get him in, and then we'll be ready to move on from Nick. and Nate will take over, because now this will be Nate's third year.
Well, I don't think it necessarily had anything to do with not liking Nate Sudfeld, because I think the organization does like him. But remember, that's where the emotion comes into it, the fact that Nick's coming off a Super Bowl. I mean, he just beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. So nobody in their right mind is going to say Nate Sudfeld is ready to take over for Nick Foles and be a competent backup of that nature. As I said, he's the best backup quarterback in football. That was pretty evident. And they had him for one more year at a tenable price where they could make it work financially. So I think it was just a football decision, and they understood that this was the end of the road. I think the only thing that would have changed that thinking was a second consecutive Super Bowl win. Then I think you have some real discussion. Ultimately, that didn't happen. And now I think you're back to the original plan, whereas Nick is gone, and the Eagles will tender Nate Sudfeld and hope to groom him to be the backup quarterback.
There's no message, though, from Nick that they bought out so quickly, correct?
No. He's trying to make things, and he said this, and this is one of the things that was always strange to me, because you had this camp of people that thought, well, he had such a bad experience in St. Louis, and he nearly retired from football, that maybe he was happy being a backup, and he would take less money, and he would do all these different things than take care of his family and take the opportunity to make $20 million a year. It was never going to happen. Nick said on numerous occasions before this past season started, he said he wanted to be the leader of a football team. Clean out day, he said it again. You don't get to the level that he's gotten to without being competitive. So the assumption that he was okay kicking back and being a backup, I think, was always sort of a false narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to be a starter in this league, and by doing what he did, he gives himself the most potential options. So it was always the logical way to go, and that's why we've been talking about it really for months, that this was going to happen.
John McMullen, let's look at some NFL stuff. Let's start with the XFL, which will start next spring. Will be a second football league. This Saturday, the AAF will kick off. Next year, the XFL will also kick off. Are they both going to run simultaneously, by the way?
Yeah, they're both going to be spring leagues, and so they're going to be fighting for talent and coaching. And you've seen some of the big names from an AAF standpoint as far as coaching, and the XFL hired their first today, and Bob Stoops, and the XFL has earmarked a lot of money for coaches and quarterbacks. So it's going to be interesting to see how they compete for players and coaches moving forward. But it does look like the XFL is going to be a little more serious this time. Oliver Luck, Andrew Luck's father, is running the football operation.
Saw him at the Super Bowl.
Bob Stoops. Yeah, and you saw Bob Stoops get hired as the Dallas coach today. So they're getting a head start on their league in the AAF. And check out, if you're an Eagles fan, check out my Twitter feed today. I listed all the former Eagles players that are in that league. Quite a few. Devontae Ballsby most recently is going to be on San Antonio. But almost every team has a former Eagle, whether they were here for camp or some nature. So it's going to be interesting if you like football.
Bob Stoops. Now, this is a guy who stepped down at Oklahoma, basically for a couple of years, resisted the NFL, and here he comes back into the XFL. So they must be paying some decent money. He's going to be the coach and GM there. Yeah,
they are. They've earmarked quite a bit, as I said, for coaches and quarterbacks, $500,000, $250,000. So for a minor league, they're going to pay pretty well for the high-profile positions. And we'll see. Obviously, the AAF doesn't have to match that this year at this point. But if they want to be fighting for that kind of thing, in the future, they're going to have to pay of that nature as well. And that's good for the players and coaches. And obviously, if there's other options. So from an employee standpoint, it's good for football players and football coaches.
Yesterday we talked a little bit about the transition tag. There's a report that the Steelers are considering using the transition tag on Le'Veon Bell. Now, that's an effort to trade him, right?
Well, you look at the Le'Veon Bell situation. Remember, they franchised him 2 consecutive years. So every time you franchise a player, the next year it goes up incrementally. So it's even higher than normal franchise tag. So to do it a third time would just be financially suicide, especially at that particular position. What the transition tag does is it enables you to match any potential offer from another organization. So if somebody comes in and offers them a 4-year deal that's palatable from a salary standpoint, maybe the Steelers try to bring him back. But I think in that situation so unique in the fact that he went nuclear on that organization. I mean, he sat out the entire year. He didn't sit out the entire year to come back to Pittsburgh. So I think that divorce is sort of a fait accompli. I don't think he's going to be back in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It just seems that they're just trying to make almost life more difficult for him any way they can.
Well, yeah, there's not exactly good blood in that relationship. I mean, you think about the average career in the NFL is still a little bit over 3 years. So you have a short shelf life to make a lot of money if you're a player in this league. And to sit out one of your prime years in your career, it just doesn't happen for good reason. And there's always a concern that maybe he doesn't have the same ability when you sit out for a full year. And maybe he comes back and he's not the same player. And then, oh, by the way, Connor played pretty well, and the Steelers were almost just as effective running the football. And some people may look at that around the league and say, well, maybe the offensive line was great. Maybe he's not quite as good as we thought he was. So there's a lot of risk from his standpoint of doing what he did.
Is the buzz around that Kyler Murray's going to play football? He's going to go to the Combine.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really knows. I think he did an interview at the Super Bowl that had people concerned, and he wasn't really sort of – scouts want to see – they always talk about the love of the game and the fact that it's such a grind to play football. You have to want to do it. So there are already antennas raised of the fact that he was sort of hemming and hawing and thinking about baseball versus football. And by the way, if he's a legit baseball prospect and he's going to get to the major leagues, I don't know why he'd choose football. Because if you get to the major leagues in baseball, I mean, you don't have the health worries. You're going to make a ton of money. Your career's going to be longer. To me, it's a no-brainer decision. You choose baseball every single time. Mm-hmm. Last one, probably Jeff Samardzija, if you remember him, former Notre Dame receiver, was going to be a first-round pick. Was also a big-time baseball prospect as a pitcher. He made the right decision. He chose baseball. He's ended up being a very, very average pitcher, but look at how much money he's made.
That's a tough one because baseball is just so, we talked about it earlier. The Phillies made this trade and they gave up prospects. And it's like, I'm trading prospects for established major leaguers every time because established major leaguers have shown me they can play. Prospects, you just never know.
Yeah, and that's the part of it. I mean, you got to get to the major leagues. But if you get to the major leagues and you have confidence in your ability as a baseball prospect, that's the better way to go. I mean, and it's really not even close.
All right, man. Plenty of football. We'll keep our eye on the full stuff. What happens there, and of course, AAF this weekend. We will. I'm intrigued enough to say I'm going to watch on Saturday.
There you go. I'm going to watch as well.
All right,
and
man.
I'm rooting for Markelle Fultz. I hope he gets it together in Orlando.
We shall see. I would not have made that trade, but, I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, they had to do it, and I give Elton a lot of credit. And, hey, I thought, Markel loves Chick-fil-A. I joked about that. That was the high point of his career here when they got the media Chick-fil-A when they introduced him. But I thought they would be wrangling between an 8-piece meal and a 12-piece meal. So the fact that he got what he got, I think is pretty good.
John McMullen at JF McMullen. More on the NFL and the Eagles at 97.3 ESPN.com. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thanks, Mike.